على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت مسلم بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يرى أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين ألا اقتحم العقبة Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Are we live? Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome back to the third of this part of the For the Love of Allah series, which is Being Muslim. That takes place every Thursday. Thanks to the MSA of CPUT Bellville, they invited us to do this class in the Salah Room here. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So last week, just to recap, we spoke a bit about what does it mean? We asked the question, what does it mean to be Muslim? And I think that question, what I didn't really go over was the consciousness that it takes to ask ourselves that question. What does it mean? Because there is like a desire in the questioner, when they're being sincere with themselves, to want to know, what does this mean? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to be operationalizing Islam in my day-to-day life? How am I supposed to be taking Islam as a way as a guiding way to everything that I do? That consciousness is a very important aspect, because it means that we are aware that there's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of us, or is placing upon us a responsibility, or an obligation that we must fulfill as those who call ourselves Muslims, right? And so we went through it, and how Allah speaks about Islam and refers to the Muslims in the Quran. Then we also spoke about the Hadith Jibrili, where Islam is again explained, and Rasulullah explains how then Jibreel came to explain the deen to the companions, how they are supposed to be in all three stages of Iman, Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, of action, belief, and then perfection. All right. And so that's a very nice and succinct way of understanding things. Is that in what you need to be doing something, you must know, and there is an excellence that goes beyond the legal aspects, right? The excellence that goes beyond the legalities and what the obligations are. And that going above and beyond is the intimacy and love that Islam talks about. And so we find that in that hadith, it's not just talking about, oh, you must do something, you must believe something, and then you must strive to be more, but it's actually a framework whereby we understand that a Muslim has three things. A Muslim has knowledge of Islam. They know what Islam is about, right? They know the 5 salahs and they act it, right? They enact their fasting, they perform their hajj, they give zakah, right? And they bear witness in action that there is only one Allah, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the beloved last and final messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so then we move on from that baseline of what you need to do to the more, or rather we go and look at the knowledge aspect even deeper, right? Because now there's things that you can enact, but then you don't truly have that deeper knowledge of things. The action, what we are taught, was that is how people are growing up in Muslim families. When you get to the next step, that is, now I must understand what I'm doing. All right, what does it mean that there is an Allah? You know, that's Iman, that you believe in Allah, that you believe in His Prophet. So that means you must, there's an act of, or rather not an action, but rather there's this internal process that's going on, where you are now coming to grips with the things that you have at first been putting into place through action. Right? Why is it that you know that this Quran is, why do we believe in the Quran? Why do we believe in these things? Asking the questions. So Iman is the point of knowledge, right? The point of seeking through knowledge. So you believe in Allah. So you believe in the books that He said. That you believe in all of these things, and then it is ihsan, because once you have the action, and once you have the knowledge of why you're doing this action, then it will only, the next step is to realize the love, the connection between you and Allah, that He is there and you are there, and that it's a two-way street. All right? Like being Muslim is subtitled, or subcategorized under the total series, which is for the love of Allah, because we are Muslim out of our love for Allah. If we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, then many scholars have explained that when you go into the Surah Al-Fatiha and you start to go into the verses and realize that actually this is a conversation, right? Our sheikhs have told us this, that this is a conversation between you and Allah, that you are saying something and Allah is responding to you, right? And so when you go into the Surah Al-Fatiha and you find that, for example, you say you profess the rahmah and the mercy of God, you profess that, and then it takes you further into the Fatiha, where you start to testify things. You say, Iyyaka na'budu. Indeed, I am enslaved. I enslave myself to you. Because that's the conversation that you are in. You are willingly in a relation, in an interaction of love, so enthralled, so overwhelmed by the rahmah and the mercy and the love of Allah, that you naturally enslave yourself to you. All right, and so that is to be Muslim. The ultimate goal is Allah. right? Muslim is simply, if we define Islam and we define Muslim in the terminology that is given, Islam is a way of is submission, and the Muslim is the one who submits, right? And so it's this, but it's not just simply submission, because submission can be beaten into, submission can be coerced, submission can be manipulated, right? You can be manipulated into being submissive. And so we see that if we look at slavery and we look at the history that slavery has in the world, then we see that submission usually takes one grotesque form, right? And slavery usually takes this grotesque form. But here in the Quran, in the beginning, in the opening, that is the opening of the Quran and the opening of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the opening of everything, the opening conversation, right? Because they say that if you read, if you want to speak to Allah, then you must make salah. That my father used to tell us this, and our sheikhs also told us this, that if you want to speak to Allah, you make salah. If you want to hear, if you want to have Allah speak back to you, if you want to have God speak to you, then you must read the Quran. And the opening conversation that you have is immediately that you go into this willful submission, this willful slavery that you don't find anywhere else really outside of a relationship of love, right? So being Muslim is a loving surrender, right? Now, then we spoke about the strangers, and we went into the details of like what our society is like now and how it's very similar antagonistically towards Islam. It's very similar to the Quraysh, right? And how Islam was back then. And so when we deal with that and we look at that, we see that what Rasulullah says in this hadith is very true, that, that indeed Islam began as something strange. It was foreign, right? The people looked at it and it was weird and outside. And then Rasulullah says, and it will go back to being strange. And so we looked at that last week when we saw that actually, yeah, we are in that same spot now again. We are in a spot where if you profess your Islamic beliefs, then you are looked at as a concern in some countries, as a concern of national interest, the national security concern. But yeah, if you and it's like, it's not even that you are going towards fundamental extremism, but rather if you just stay within the nuanced understandings of true Islam, then you are looked at very cautiously, right? But Rasulullah makes dua and he says, oh, glad tidings to the strangers, those who will be strange and those who are strange at that time, right? And so our time is equated with the time of Rasulullah. And then we went into a little bit deeper, exactly looking at how we are the strangers, traditional, and we said that, the traditional religions have kowtowed, that have like bowed down to the secularist thought. And so now there seems to be that, or to society, the way that the ideologies that are running society at the moment are secularist, that they are un-Islamic, right? They're not based in Islam whatsoever, and yet Muslims take that as a foundation for arguments, right? As to why can't something be this way or that way, and so we see Muslims are following suit because that is the way that things have come about, right? And so there's the societal pressure that then puts us on the outside, because those of us who want to hold onto Islam like the hot coals that Rasulullah promised that it would be, are now facing the pressure from society that if you say anything against this group, or if you say anything against that group, and you're not saying anything against the group or another group, you are simply stating the foundations of your own belief, but you are seen as attacking. And so then you are curtailed, and you are pressured into maybe saying something differently, or maybe saying something a bit more palatable for the world. right? And so we find that is again how the same request was that of the Quraysh. They didn't just say, stop what you're saying. They said, maybe you could say something nice about our gods. Maybe you can do this. Maybe you can do that. And then Rasulullah, they said, we'll give you everything. We'll give you whatever you ask for. We'll make you the king among us. We'll give you wealth and everything, right? And Rasulullah's response was, if they were to put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, even then, I'm not going to change what I'm saying, right? You can do whatever. I'm not going to change what I'm saying. But what we find now is that we have people that do change what the religion teaches, right? And they profess certain things that are completely opposite to what we are, what Islam is all about, because of the societal pressures that are around us, right? Yeah. So I think that was the recap of last week. So this week we're just continuing, and we're going on with the difficulty, the struggles of being a Muslim in today's time. And so we know that Islam is simple. The way of life that we have been given is a simple way of life. It gives us a way to move through this world, very straightforward. We know what to do here, we know what to do there, right? What our scholars have taught, what our sheikhs passed down from their sheikhs from their teachers, the chains that are strongly established in our tradition. It's all there, and it gives so much stability. It gives a holistic stability, not just in your private belief, but also in how you engage with the world around you, that you are responsible and conscientious, right? But doing those things, actually operationalizing it, has its challenges. And we know that, right? If Islam is to testify, and if being Muslim is to testify and to submit to the Creator and say that you believe in Him, Allah says to us, right? I can't remember the ayah now, but Allah says to us in the Quran, so you say you believe then, right? So we do. And Allah says, fine, I will test you. He says that. It's plain. I will test you. Right? And the tests that come, we know that the tests come in our life. Our life is difficult. This dunya is a place that tests us constantly in staying on that straight path, staying on the path of Islam. Right? And so we know that it wasn't just hard. It's not just hard now. Going back to the hadith of the strangers, it was hard at the time of Rasulullah. It was actually, if we think about it, they suffered immensely. There was such as the community, the Muslim community was so small in the world, and they had no, when they looked around them, at the physical world, there was nobody to back them. They stood man alone, and faced insurmountable odds. They saw, armies that were twice, 3 times their size faced them, and they fought on. Right? They suffered at the hands of the Quraysh before the permission to go to fighting was given. And that was difficult because they didn't fight back. The Muslims were forced out of Makkah, but not allowed to leave. So the vicinity, right? So they were kept in the desert for years, right? They were tortured, beaten, murdered, right? Some of our great martyrs of Islam. The first martyr of Islam was a woman named Sumaya, and she, completely rejected the pleas of the Quraysh to say, come and accept our gods. And she could have accepted it. She could have said on her tongue that she doesn't believe in Allah, and her heart could have remained, but she wouldn't. She wouldn't, not even for a second, allow herself to utter that words. That's how strong she was. All right. And we had Muslims, the companions, that were like that. They wouldn't even dare utter it, even though they're allowed to. That's beyond, because that's the legal. That's the legality, right? You can do it. And they said, no ways. Why would I give up my Allah for anything? Even on my tongue, I wouldn't allow my tongue to do that. Because that's love. That is beyond the legal. That's transcending this legal aspect of this foundational part of the religion. They were beyond that. So far beyond it. Nowadays, if you say something about one specific community or another, you can lose your job. So you just sit there quietly and say, yes, okay, let them go on with their programs, let them go on with their, diversity and inclusivity programs, and you must just sit, because you can't lose your livelihood. And you know what, the reality is that you are allowed to do that. There is ways for you. That is for you, so that you don't have to struggle. But the thing is that we actually should be struggling. We should be saying, you know what, that's not true. Or we should be standing up against falsehood, regardless of the consequence. Because that is how the initial strangers were. And we should be following that footsteps, right? So being a Muslim is hard. I mean, if we look at even beyond Rasulullah, before his birth, we find that, what about the other prophets? And their people, right? What about Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam? Who was his people? Was he not a nation by himself? He was sent to different people all over the place. He was by himself, moving around. And his way wasn't it's not easy to follow someone who's got no support. What about Nabi Musa? Right? He had to go and struggle against Pharaoh and debate and debate and debate. And even then, when he got these people out, they were still chased. So people could have stayed behind, stayed in the comforts of slavery. Right? And Nabi Isa as well, who the Christians, the apostles of Nabi Isa, were persecuted by the Romans, right? So we see with that is that even though Islam is, you can see, because when we say Islam is simple, it's like you can see a road out in front of you, and it's simple. I just got to go down this road. But to go down that road is difficult. But you know that that's what you have to do. That's how simple it is. You have to go do that. But to do it is to operationalize it difficult. And so, it's like, you have to get to the top of the mountain. The transcendental is sitting at the top and you have to climb that way. So this climb, I need to do it. And it's so simple as that. I need to do it. But the actual physical climbing is strenuous and it's difficult. And the steeper the climb, the harder it is. All right. So if we imagine it like this, and so I want to frame it like this, right? This is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're supposed to be establishing as Muslims, right? We frame it like this, that if you have an XY axis, right? So you have the origin, which is this let me just see if I can get no, can I get I can't find it now. But if you imagine the point of origin is that the 0, 0 coordinates, right? And so that is if you look at the horizontal, right? Let me just see if that's right. So if we look at the vertical is towards infinity, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is infinitely high and transcendental, right? The horizontal is the dunya, this earth, right? So we are on this earth. And so on this earth, we try and get as close to Allah as possible. And so as we move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we tend towards the origin, the source, right? The gradient increases, right? Towards the infinitely high. And so you find that if you were on the furthest points, the gradient is less. but the closer you come to the source, the gradient is higher. So this relationship, this horizontal relationship, the more close you are to Allah on this dunya, the harder the ascent, right? The steeper the gradient. And so now, if you think about it like that, that explains, you know, at least that's how I seek to rationalize the idea that when the closer we are to Allah, because Allah tells us this, Allah says that He tests whom He loves, right? We know this, that Allah tests whom He loves, and so the prophets were tested the greatest. They had the steepest climb to make because they were the closest to the source, and Rasulullah was the closest, right? He is the closest, right? And so if we look at the horizontal and we see the path, all right, or if we look at the vertical and we see it as a path, now imagine a path, which is this dust, right? You're in the middle of the desert. Picture a desert all around you, and you're walking down this oasis, or this path through the desert. The sand everywhere, the hot sun, right? And you know at the end of this path is your destination, and you will desire this destination more than anything. If you stranded in the desert with a group of people, and you're following, and someone says, okay, I know the way to the city. If we stay here, we will surely die. But if you follow me, we're going to get to the city, right? And that city is going to be your salvation. You're going to survive. You will live, right? So you're longing to live. You desire to live. So you follow the person, right? But you're walking down this path, and this path is difficult. It's in the middle of the desert. It's hot. Then at night it gets cold and dark and lonely, right? Everybody's busy sitting by themselves, trying to keep themselves warm. And you've been traveling, and now you're traveling down this path for a long time, following this caravan, right? Following this guy who says, look, I have this map. And then imagine you see in the distance, off to the side, you look to your left or your right, and you see an oasis. And the water is glistening in the sun. You can see it shimmering there. Just off to your right, you can almost reach it. Right? You think, I can just go down there. I can get some water, come back. Maybe I can give everybody water, right? And then you veer. So you would want to go to it. You would want to go towards that water. Yet the guide says, the man with the map, he says, look, stay on this path. Don't go off anywhere. There's no oasis here that you can see on this map. The map doesn't show any oasis, but you say, but I see it. It's right there. And he says, no, just stay here. Follow me. We're going to go. We know exactly where we're headed, right? We've been there before. We got a map. And you go, no. I'm going to go get some water. Everybody's thirsty. I'm going to sort everybody out. That's what the person would want to do. And then you run off and you chase this. You go towards this oasis, but then you look again and think it's further. And you chase it and you chase it. And it's a mirage. It disappears. And your limited, rationality, your limited intellect has been fooled by the surrounding environment to think that there's something there that will save you. Right? And you refuse then to put yourself aside, to think that you know best. You refuse to put that aside. Right? For the one that says, look, I've got clearly a map and it doesn't show anything. And so you've now gotten lost in the desert. Yet there's always someone calling on the path, saying, Chikir, come back. Here's the path. Right? That is Islam. And that is the way that we live. Right? You always have people, you always have the guide. The guide is always sending you a sign again to come back. That's Allah calling you to turn to Him. Right? The path is this Islam, and that barren desert is the dunya. That tricks you with illusions. Haddad, one of the great sheikhs, he made a statement. We asked his class, actually, posed a question to his students, and he said, if you had two options, I give you two options. I give you either you get a moment of ecstasy, all the pleasure in the world. You get a moment of that, and then you fall. And then after that moment, you fall into despair, like you're just continuously falling in nothingness, in a void. Right? You get that. Or you can have a wasteland. You can be walking on a barren piece of land forever. Right? And which one are you going to choose? I'll ask you now, which one would you choose? The barons. Yes, Imam Haddad actually stopped his students and he said, you choose that one, isn't it? They said, yes. You choose the waste, the barren land, because nobody wants to go through a moment of pleasure and then suffer for eternity. Right? But Imam Haddad said, but what if I told you? And he says, Imam Haddad says that I'm telling you now that everybody, all of humanity chooses a moment of the wasteland, and they turn aside an eternity of pleasure. Because that's what this dunya is. It's a moment of wasteland, a moment of dust. That's the oasis, that's the illusion. That's what's calling you off the path. You know? And so the Muslim is the one that's steadfast on the path, right? If we look at, and even the path gets difficult, right? So I think that we're almost running out of time. We've got 1 minute. But there's a surah that I would recommend that everybody goes to read, the Surah Al-Balad, right? The surah of the city. And I was reading that surah over and over. It's Surah 90. It's only about 20 verses, right? If you read the English of that surah, it's incredible. It depicts to us exactly how it depicts to us exactly how this life is difficult for us now in this city. All right? So Surah Al-Balad starts off by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking a qasam, swearing upon the city. Al-Balad is a city. But in the context, the Mufassirin, they translate it and they say that is Makkah. Right? And Allah is saying, I swear by this city. Right? That you are free in the city. There's no restraint upon you here. Right? And so you and your children, everything. Right? And so I got the Quran here, but then Allah is in Surah Balad, verse 4, in the fourth ayah of this, the fourth ayah of this surah, Allah says, and we definitely, verily, indeed, created man to struggle in this life, to toil and struggle. We created you to struggle, right, on this path. Because then he goes and he explains how, do you think that nobody has power over you? And then, and you may boast that you've got so much wealth but you've wasted it. And Allah says, and yet we've given you, we've given you eyes, we've given you ears, we've given you these things to perceive the world around you. And yet you're still so content in this world. And then we've shown you the two ways, the path, right? But nobody wants to take, Allah says, but you don't want to take the steep path, the uphill climb, the ascension, right? You don't want to take that path because it's difficult. And then Surah Al-Balad, Allah says, and what would make you know what is the steep path? And I'm going to read it directly because it's quite beautiful actually. But Allah says that it's the freeing of a slave and the feeding of an orphan, close in kinship, someone that is related to you, right? Or the one that is the starving person in a time of famine that is lying in the dust, right? That people are neglecting. And then he says, and then once you come to that point, he says you don't want to take that, and so you won't be of those who believe, that establish patience in their hearts, right? That says you won't be of those who believe and enjoy patience and enjoying deeds of kindness and compassion. So you got sabr and rahmah, right? Compassion. That is part of, that is the steep path, because it's actually difficult to be kind and compassionate in this world without straying from the path. We live in a time right? And then Allah says, and those will be the ones with the right hand that He talks about in other surahs later in the Quran as well, right? But we live in a time where being kind is taken almost like anything that someone says to you, you must accept it, and that's kindness. Whatever a person says, I am this or I am that, you must accept it, and that's a kindness. But actually, it's not. The real kindness, the real compassion is actually caring for that person. If my mother always used to say, if I didn't care about you, then I wouldn't worry about your marks. You know, you're gonna come here with bad marks, or if you did this or you did that, I'm not gonna worry about it because I don't care about you. But I'm only gonna give you a hiding, I'm only gonna scare you out because I love you, right? Because there is a level of harshness, a tough love that is needed in our lives, right? Because otherwise, if we didn't have tough love, we're going to come with all kinds of delusions and whimsical ideas about what reality is, and nobody's going to say anything because let that person that you don't care. That means that you don't care enough for that person that you will let them just go off on their own. You will let them go into the desert rather than call them back onto the path. Let them chase a mirage, right? So, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, I think that is the last minute that we have. And so the question is, what are we to do? And that is, inshallah, for next week. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is the meeting for all, please?